and the fact that we're aware of it may increase some anxiety right now, and hurt and anger. But it's been said, sunshine is the best disinfectant. By seeing it, by people feeling a sense of urgency about it, by the larger American community realizing that. Gosh, maybe this is a problem, and we've seen even some very conservative commentators begin to acknowledge. This is something maybe we need to work on that promises the possibility of actually getting it done. So, it hurts, but if we don't diagnose this, we can't fix it. Aisha Rasko. Reuters. Question, thank you, Mr. President. As you come to the end of your term, there's a lot of talk about your legacy. I know you may like to leave that to the historians, but President Obama, I do. Question, but when you look back on your presidency and consider race relations, what do you hope your legacy will be? How do you think the shootings in Dallas and the high-profile shootings by police and other events will shape the way your presidency is remembered? President Obama, I do want to leave legacy questions to the history books. But what I can do, maybe this is a fair response to your question. Is to say how I've tried to lead the country on this issue. More than anything, what I hope is that my voice has tried to get all of us as Americans to understand the difficult legacy of race. To encourage people to listen to each other. to recognize that the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and discrimination didn't suddenly vanish with the passage of the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act, or the election of Barack Obama. That things have gotten better, substantially better, but that we've still got a lot more work to do, and that as was the case with the police task force that we set up, that I've tried to encourage people to come up with practical concrete solutions that can reduce, if not eliminate, the problems of racial bias. And if my voice has been true and positive, then my hope would be that it may not fix everything right away. But it surfaces problems, it frames them. It allows us to wrestle with these issues and try to come up with practical solutions, and that perspective may lead to continued improvement, so that not just Malia and Sasha, but their children can experience a country that is more just and more united and more equal. And that's not going to happen right away, and that's okay. We plant seeds, and somebody else maybe sits under the shade of the tree that we planted. And I'd like to think that, as best as I could, I have been true in speaking about these issues. Justin. Question, thanks, Mr. President. Throughout the summit, EU leaders have echoed your confidence about Brexit happening in an orderly way. They've also stressed that the UK has to have access to an open market. Must continue to respect the freedom of migration for workers. Someone who has repeatedly advocated for globalization and extolled the virtues of immigration. Shouldn't that principle be pre-baked in the negotiations? What specific assurances did you get during the summit from other leaders that make you confident that the currency markets are wrong? And the political turmoil in Britain and subsequently the EU will go smoothly? And finally, both you and Secretary Kerry have used if to describe Brexit. So I'm wondering if you see any way for the British people to put the toothpaste back in the tube on this issue. President Obama, I think we have to assume that a referendum having been passed, with a lot of attention. A lengthy campaign and relatively high participation rates, is going to stick, and that the incoming government a conservative government, is going to invoke Article 50 and begin the process of negotiations. How that process unfolds, how the negotiations work, I think is going to be up to the parties involved. The main message I've had here is we are close friends, allies, commercial partners with the UK and with the EU. We will remain close friends, allies, partners. Continue to have strong relationships on both sides of the channel. Our primary interest is to make sure that the negotiations and this process are as orderly and as sensible as possible. Recognizing that it is in the interests of both sides to get it right. They are major trading partners. That's where goods get sent, back and forth. And it's important that neither side harden positions in ways that ultimately do damage to their respective. Economies and ultimately to the world economy at a time when our world economy is still pretty wobbly in places. I want to make a further point. I'm not sure it's accurate to say that I am a huge booster of globalization. What is accurate to say is that I believe the process of globalization is here to stay as a consequence of technology and the mobility of capital, and cargo container ships and global supply chains. And conceivably, we could run back the tape to 50 years ago and see whether we could rearrange some of that process. But it's happening. It's here. And we see it every day in our lives. Everybody who has got a smartphone in their pocket is seeing it. And my argument has been that there are enormous benefits to be gained from that global integration. Just as there are enormous benefits to be gained from European integration. So long as we recognize that with that integration there is the danger of increased inequality. Or workers having less leverage and capital having more leverage, that it threatens to leave people behind. And if we don't take steps to make sure everybody can participate in that global integration, making sure that wages are high enough, making sure that we rebuild the social compact so that pensions and health care are taken care of, making sure that communities are not completely abandoned when a factory leaves and theirs. An economic plan for transition. If we do not do that effectively, then there's going to be a backlash. With respect to immigration, it is America's experience that immigration has been by far a net plus for our economic growth, our culture, our way of life. Now, in America, that's by necessity, because unless you're a Native American, everybody came from someplace else. Europe may not have as many of those traditions. But keep in mind, one of the huge macroeconomic advantages that America has is we're still a relatively young country. Our birth rate is not dropping off like Europe's is, or Russia's is, or China's, or Japan's. And that's as a consequence of immigration. And it's economics 101, if you've got a younger population, your growth rate is going to be higher. And immigrants are strivers, and they work hard. And they're looking to build a better life. Otherwise they wouldn't move from where they were. And that's been part of our tradition and our culture and our society. Now, huge influxes of the sort that we've seen in Europe, that's always going to be a shock to the system. And I think it is entirely appropriate for Europe, even as generous as it has been, and I think that Chancellor Merkel deserves enormous credit. And other European leaders who have taken in these migrant populations deserve enormous credit. Because that's hard. It's a strain on the budget. It's a strain on politics. It's a strain on culture. It's legitimate for them to say, look, we got to slow this thing down. We got to manage it properly. That's why we're setting up a U. N Conference on Refugees on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. Because a few countries shouldn't be shouldering the burden for 60 million refugees. And we've got to come up with strategies to allow people in countries that are very poor. Or are in the middle of a war zone, enjoy some peace and prosperity. Otherwise, the world has shrank and they're going to want to move. And that's not going to go away anytime soon. So it's one more reason why, given the fact of global integration, we have to think globally, more broadly. Because our security interests, our economies are all going to depend on the institutional arrangements that we have across boundaries. And NATO is an example of a really enduring multilateral. Institution that helped us get through some very difficult times. But even the best of institutions have to be adapted to new circumstances. That's true for organizations like NATO. It's true for organizations like the U. And it's true for organizations like the EU. It's true for all the architecture that has helped the world and our countries improve their standard. Of livings and reduce overall violence between states substantially over the last several decades. Mark Landler. Question, thank you very much, Mr. President. You've been scrupulous about saying you would not comment on the Justice Department. Investigation of Hillary Clinton's email. The investigation is now closed. And I hope that I could ask you about some of the comments that FBI Director Comey made a few days ago. President Obama, you may, Mark, but I want you to make sure you're not wasting your question. I'm going to continue to be scrupulous about not commenting on it. Just because I think Director Comey could not have been more exhaustive. My understanding is not only did he make a full presentation, but while we were over here. Or at least flying, he was presenting to Congress for hours on end. But I just want to give you a chance, just in case you didn't want to burn your question.